Suddenly, all the Daleks on Venus vanished. Although it was known that huge fleets of them had returned to other universes, a large section of them were last seen somewhere near the Great Churchill Mountains.
"But where are they?"
demanded Val Karnine, the Martian who had just been appointed Supreme Commander of the Space Army. Jeff and Andy Stone looked at each other and shrugged. "I wish we knew," said Andy. "They've still got Mary, our sister." There was a pause as the three men gazed down into the still lake that reached up to the gigantic Winston Dam. Val broke the silence eventually.
"I hate saying this, but she may be dead."
Andy shook his head stubbornly. "Not Mary." "I agree with Andy," said Jeff. "There'd be some trace of her."
"Of course, I hope you're right."
Val straightened up.
"Well, I must get back. Earth is sending my battle orders on Lightspeed radio. See you both later at headquarters for dinner."
They watched Val walk along the top of the Winston Dam and his tiny figure eventually disappear into the distance. They turned and leaned on the parapet and searched the waters beneath them for ideas. "Incredible to think, Andy, that this dam is the only power source of electricity for the whole of Venus, and also that at one time this whole area was an ocean." He turned and pointed up at the mountains. "The sea covered those mountains at one time, I believe." Jeff turned and looked up at the Churchill Mountains idly and then stiffened. He peered at the mountain top. "Andy, you and I know these mountains well. The three peaks are all the same height, or they were." "Were?" questioned Andy. He stared at the mountain tops and nearly rubbed his eyes in amazement. The middle peak was higher than the other two. "Mountains don't grow, Andy," murmured Jeff grimly. "The Daleks!" cried Andy. His brother nodded. "That's where they are. They've hollowed out the mountain and put a false top on it. And Mary may be there. Andy, she's got to be. Let's go and find out. We can borrow a copter jet from Val." 20 minutes later, they landed the small jet craft at the base of the middle mountain and jumped to the ground. "They may have a warning system, Andy. That's why I landed the copter jet here. We're in for a stiff climb." The gentle rise of the early slopes, softly covered with silver Venusian weedgrass, began to give way to steeper inclines. Soon both their hands were roughened and cut by the sharp rock faces, and their clothes began to look worse for wear. After about 2 hours, with only a third of the way climbed, Jeff called a halt beside a little pool of singing fish. Andy took off his shoes and sprinkled the water over his aching toes. "They can't have started digging at the top of the mountain," said Jeff thoughtfully. He looked at Andy as his brother gave a sharp cry of surprise. "What's the matter?" "The ground, Jeff. It's burning hot, just here." Jeff went over cautiously to the spot Andy indicated and felt it with his hand. "What's the water from the pool like?" "Cool. Besides, the fish wouldn't sing if the water was even warm." Jeff felt about on the surface with his hands and began to follow a direct line, crawling on all fours. Andy scrambled back into his shoes and followed. "The heat is contained in a straight line," said Jeff. "It's leaning to that big black rock over there. Must be a pipe just underneath the surface." They followed the line of the heat until they reached the rock. Jeff stopped and felt the ground all around him. "It's no good. It seems to go right underneath the boulder." He looked up at his brother, who was examining the boulder carefully. "Jeff, there are some very interesting marks on here. Look." Jeff joined his brother and suddenly gave an excited cry. "Of course! These round marks are made by a Dalek sucker stick. The others, the scratch marks, must have been made by their gun sticks. You push that side and I'll do the same here." They put their shoulders against the boulder and heaved. The whole rock began to slide backwards smoothly and silently. Beneath them, they saw the beginning of a broad metal roadway that they knew could only have been built for the Daleks. They followed the underground road quickly, realizing that it was spiraling upwards and round inside the mountain. The tunnel was brightly lit by a never-ending row of electric bulbs. Finally, they came around one corner and Jeff stopped so quickly that Andy cannoned into him. The tunnel ended abruptly and became a metal platform for about 10 yards and then swung downwards like a ramp into the center of the hollowed out mountain. 1,000 lights glowed on a scene of incredible wonder. They were looking at an enormous cavern filled with 20 Dalek rocket ships, each one standing on its end and pointing up to the top of the mountain. On the floor of the cavern below them, they could see hundreds of Daleks gliding about, working on the last readjustments to the rocket ships, and supervising about 50 human beings who were working as slave labor. Each one of the humans, man or woman, had the task of rolling a large metal oil drum from the stockpile to the base of the rockets, where its contents was drawn out to supply the interior of the space fleet. Then empty drums had to be carried to another point and the process repeated. The brothers could see many people in the last stages of exhaustion, and obviously the Daleks were working them ceaselessly. Andy tapped Jeff on his shoulder and pointed. One of the figures below them paused briefly for a moment to brush her hair away from her eyes. "It was Mary, after all this time," breathed Jeff. We've found her. But how do we get her out?" "You go down and mingle with all those people. Get near Mary and then spread the word. They're all to run up the ramp and into this tunnel when the lights go out." Andy moved away. Jeff watched anxiously as Andy crept down the metal ramp. He saw him manage to reach a knot of people, merge with them, and help with the oil drums without any of the Daleks noticing. Jeff watched his brother edge nearer and nearer to Mary. Finally he reached her. His hand found hers and it touched briefly. She raised a weary face to his, and then her eyes blazed with excitement and relief. Jeff saw Mary and Andy begin to warn the people to prepare to escape. The moment had come. He went back to the tunnel to examine one of the wall bulbs. Slipping off his coat and using it to protect his hand from the heat, he unscrewed a bulb and laid it carefully on the metal flooring. He ripped one of the buttons off his tunic and it flattened under his heel. He picked up the cooling bulb and carefully replaced the piece of metal on the screw end of the bulb, pushed it back into its socket and gave it a sharp twist. Immediately all the lights went out, and the whole interior of the mountain was plunged into darkness. With one accord, the slaves on the cavern floor rushed up the ramp, urged on by Andy and Mary. Jeff pressed himself against the wall of the tunnel as they streamed past him to safety. He could hear the crisp, metallic voices of the Daleks in the cavern, and heard a scream as one unlucky human ran into a Dalek and was killed instantly by its powerful gunstick. As the last person raced by, Jeff moved from the wall and followed. He knew the Daleks would quickly get the lights working again and didn't want to be around when that happened. Gasping for breath, he ran from the mouth of the tunnel into daylight to find Andy waiting. Together, they pushed the rock back into place. "They won't bother to give chase," panted Jeff. "My guess is they'll get into their spaceships and make a run for it. Where's Mary?" "Gone back to the copter jet to give the alarm to Val Carnine," replied Andy. "We must get these people away from here. They'll be safer at the foot of the mountain." They started to hurry the grateful group of people down the mountain. Jeff saw Mary climbing to meet him and ran towards his sister. They spent a few precious seconds clasped in each other's arms. Andy joined them, and each taking one of her hands led her to the copter jet. "I've spoken to Vel," she said. "He's on his way." They sat down on the ground amidst the crowd of people. Suddenly they witnessed the entire top of the mountain peak begin to raise on 6 enormous stalks. The false top then split into 6 different sections and curved away, leaving a gaping hole open to the sky. As all eyes fixed on the opening, they saw the rocket ships of the last Daleks on Venus began to soar away from the mouth of the mountain. 3, 8, 15... 20 rocket ships, black with zigzag lines of white, lifted themselves out onto powerful autojets and began to form into a flight sequence above the towering peaks of the Churchill Mountains. "They're getting away," groaned one of the newly freed human beings. But Mary pointed to the sky left of the mountains. The sun glinted on tiny darts shooting towards the Daleks, and Val Carnine's space army ships dived down on them in perfect formation. Tremendous explosions rent the air miles above the little cluster of watchers as Dalek after Dalek was shattered to bits or plunged Venuswards to destruction. A cheer burst from the crowd. Only once did the group fall silent as a Dalek broadside of violet laser rays crumpled the side of one of Karneen's ships. It broke in two and plummeted to the ground with an ear-splitting roar. It was the sole success the Daleks scored. One by one their ships were smashed until just one remained. More agile and cunning than the rest, it twisted and turned, dived and climbed, eluding the guns of the attackers until it seemed as if it would escape. Vel Karneen's space flagship zoomed towards it, and matching its speed flew directly above it. The Watchers saw Vel give his autojets a boost, so that he drew slightly ahead. Then Vel raised the nose of the craft. Flaring rockets from the tail raked the Dalek ship underneath from end to end, burning it open until it split down the center. Billows of black smoke belched from the doomed Dalek spaceship as it staggered into the sky. It cartwheeled downwards and fell with a tremendous explosion into the center of Winston Dam Lake. Vel Karneen's spaceship circled over the gaping mountain, then flew back to their base. The Watchers looked at each other almost in disbelief. Was it really over? Were the Daleks really driven off Venus? Then everyone smiled. It was over. Their smiles turned to laughter, and Jeff and Mary led them home.